Thank you and welcome everyone to Granny Squares for Beginners. So today we are going to take on the classic crochet stitch, which is a double crochet, turning it into some beautiful granny squares. And once you have mastered your granny square, there is no telling what you're going to do with these granny squares. You can turn them into bags, you can turn them into scarves, you can turn them into sweaters. There's so many different things that you can do with this really versatile block. So I'm going to be showing you the very basics of how to get started. And along with the very basics, I have provided for this class some PDFs. So there is a step-by-step guide that goes along with this class that has my little hands. I'm a hand model now, showing you step-by-step some of these visual steps. In case you're really struggling with watching the video, you can come back to this. And I'm also going to provide you with a PDF, or there is a PDF of a pattern that I've kind of handwritten. But I like to handwrite this because I'm relatively new to crochet still, believe it or not. It took me just recently, I kind of really started getting into it. So sometimes crochet patterns can be challenging for people to read if they have no crochet skill at all. So this is kind of like a beginner-friendly guide to a crochet pattern as well, that maybe can help you bridge over to start learning how to use the real crochet patterns. So all of this is available to you, and Kina will be dropping it into the chat with the PDFs for both of these things, step-by-steps on how to do all the little basics, and also the step-by-steps of the pattern we're going to be using. You might have already recognized in the materials list some of the colorways that I'm going to be using. So this bag is using the colors that I suggested from this class. So we have a white, we have a light coral, we have a sage green, and we have a leaf green. And then I also threw in a little pop of peach. So what I like to do is I love variegated yarn. I like getting lots of different colors, bang for my buck. So I'll pick out like a variegated yarn, and then I'll kind of start looking at the color scheme inside of that variegated yarn. And that's how I kind of branched out to get into these cool different patterns. And then what's nice about picking several different colors is that when we start making our granny squares, we can have lots and lots of mix and match colors. So using these same colors in lots of different ways with the different patterns, in different ways that we put the colors together can make for some really beautiful things. So yes, pick whatever colors you happen to enjoy. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my other screen so that I can talk a little bit more about yarn and a little bit more about what we're going to go with. So I tend to use loops and threads. This is Impeccable, and this is a really beautiful brown color. This is called Soft Taupe. So in this particular sweater that I happen to be working on, I use 3 different Impeccable colors for my yarns. So I used this Soft Taupe, I used a Golden Beige, and I used a Walnut. And using those 3 and kind of playing with those, I've been able to come up with kind of a really nice neutral brown natural kind of looking thing too. So those are 3 really great colors to mix and match with for your granny squares, or again, using the ones that I suggested or any other colors that you happen to have. But I suggest using a soft classic or an Impeccable, and both the soft classic and the Impeccable are what we call a medium weight yarn. So on your yarn, we'll always have this little symbol that tells you the number 4 is a medium weight, and it also suggests what hook size to use. Yes, perfect. So then you're going to use, this suggests a size, a US size H, which is a 5mm hook. I tend to use a larger hook because I want my squares to be a little bit larger. So I had an assortment pack of all the different hook sizes. So feel free to use what they suggest, but I'm going to jump all the way up to a J. And I'm going to be using a J with my medium size weight today, just so that you can see my stitches a little bit bigger. And so they're easier for you to follow along. All right, so we are going to get started, and the first thing that we're going to do is going to be a slip knot. So if you have these instructions, go ahead and download them or save them for later. When this video appears on YouTube, these directions will also be in a link underneath the YouTube video so that you'll have an opportunity to come back to this if you're not able to download it right now. But when we're doing a slip knot, for those of you who may have never done a slip knot before, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to use my variegated color. I like to point my finger towards my belly. And then this is the skein of yarn. And we have what's called the tail. The tail is obviously the end. And then this is called the working yarn that's still attached to the skein over here. So I'm going to point my finger towards my belly and I'm going to drape the yarn over my finger. So you'll notice when I drape it that I have on the right hand side is my tail and on the left hand side is my working yarn. I'm going to hold on to both of these with my left hand and then I'm going to twist my finger backwards. And the reason why I'm doing that is to create this cross of the yarn over top of each other. Then I'm going to put my pinchers into that loop that I just created. And I'm going to grab the working yarn. So remember, there's the tail and there's the working yarn. I'm grabbing the working yarn and pulling it through. And that's how you create something called a slip knot. And a slip knot is obviously called a slip knot because it goes up and down the yarn and it slips around and changes its shape. So I'm going to do that again. I'm pointing to my belly. I'm draping the yarn. The tail is on the right. The working yarn is on the left. And then I'm going to twist my finger. So I'm kind of like twisting my wrist and going backwards in order to cross those yarns over top of each other. I'm putting my pinchers into the loop and pulling the working yarn. So if you're stuck at slip knot and you haven't quite gotten that, maybe try using the written directions as well and see if that can get you to the next step. But once you unlock slip knot, hey, you're already on your way to crochet. So once you've unlocked slip knot, then the next thing that we're going to talk about together is something called a chain stitch. So there's another set of directions that go step by step for how to chain stitch. And when you're learning how to chain stitch, you're also going to want to learn to hold your yarn. So this is really a different kind of preference. A lot of people hold the yarn very differently. So if you're not comfortable with the way that I'm doing it, you can check out lots of different videos and lots of other instructors who have other ways. But what I do, I'm right-handed, so my hook is in my right hand. I'm going to drape the working yarn over my pinky, under my ring, over my middle, and around my pointer. So what I'm doing right here is I'm creating what we call tension. So if I spread my fingers apart, I can easily pull this yarn through my fingers and it comes through very, very easily. If I tighten my fingers, it's harder for me to pull the yarn through. So this is what we call tension when we're doing crochet. And you need tension, just like on a sewing machine, to keep your stitches nice and even. So if you want to keep the same amount of tension or the same amount of pull on your yarn as you go with your stitches, to try and keep them as even as you can. Also, this folding it over my pointer finger like this is helping me kind of keep the yarn up in the air so that it's free for me to use my hook to grab that yarn. So the purpose of a crochet hook is to grab yarn and let it do its job. That's why it's got a hook at the top, to grab some of it. So here's how we're going to do a chain stitch. I have my thumb on the thumb pad, and notice how my hook is to the right of my yarn that I'm kind of holding up using my finger. I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to go over the yarn and under the yarn. And so now I have two different loops on my hook. I'm going to pull this loop through this loop using my hook. So you might want to hold on with your finger and your thumb to the slip knot that's attached to your hook because you're trying to get this yarn to come through here. So I'm going to pull down my hook, and as I pull down my hook, I'm able to slip that chain over top of my hook. I'll definitely keep showing this and we'll kind of work on this for a little bit longer. So I'm going to go, notice my hook is on the right, my yarn is on the left. I'm going to go over the yarn and under the yarn. That's what we call yarning over the hook. Now I'm going to catch that yarn with my hook. So I kind of twisted my hook to the side to catch that yarn. And I'm going to pull that yarn through this hoop down here. So I'm kind of pulling it with my left hand away from the hook so that I can pull that yarn through that loop. So I go over and under, that's me yarning over. I twist my hook a little bit to be able to grab it with the hook. And the goal is to pull this top loop through this bottom loop. And those are all called chain stitches. Just give yourself some practice right now, especially if you've never chain stitched before. I'm kind of over exaggerating it by going over under, but really what you're just trying to do is you're trying to put the yarn over your hook. So if you don't want to go over under, you're just trying to wrap that yarn around the hook is what you're trying to do. And then every time you're grabbing it using the top of your hook and you're pulling it through the chain below. And you'll make this really nice chain stitch, lots of stitches in a row in a chain. And each one of these stitches forms like a little V. And we're going to be using those V's in order to kind of lock stitches into each other. So I want to show you that V. Oops, I got my hair in here. There we go. So each one of these stitches is like a left side and a right side that come together and make that V. So both of those things put together is called one stitch. So you have one stitch here, you have your slip knot down here. You got one stitch, two stitch, three stitch, four stitch, five stitch. And you can keep counting how many stitches you have. Now for us to be able to begin our granny square, we're going to begin with 4 stitches. So in a moment, I'm going to pull those out. But if you're looking at the papers, and maybe Kina, if you can drop these into the chat again for people who want to grab those PDFs, you can count how many stitches you have. You can kind of see a diagram to be able to see a little bit more up close and personal what that's all about. And then once we've done our chain stitch, we're going to be learning something called a slip stitch, which is the next page. It's how we're going to join the stitches together to make a circle. And then all of the granny squares that you've seen so far are based on a circle right here in the center. And then we have some petals that get stitched out of that circle. And then we do another round where we make more stitches coming out of that and more stitches coming out of the last round. And all of that is kind of explained to you too in these pattern pages. So if this is a little overwhelming, this is for beginners. So please ask questions in the chat if you want to see something again, or if you think that I can explain something in a different way for you. I'd love to try. But here's what we're about to start with our granny square. We're going to start with our slip knot. We're going to chain 4, and we're going to join those 4 into a little base circle. Then from there, we're going to build out 4 petals. We're going to have 4 of those petals, and each of those petals is going to be made up of something called double crochet. Kina, do you have those handouts? Or maybe I can, let me see if I can grab them for you too. Got it? Thank you. All right, and then we have our 3 double crochets, which is going to make 1 petal. We're going to do that 4 times, 4 different petals, and those 4 different petals are going to make that square shape that's classic for a granny square. And then we're going to keep building out the next rounds and things like that too. So we're back to our slip knot, and I'm going to do the whole thing from scratch again, and I'm going to take out these stitches, and I'm going to repeat the things that we've learned so far, and I'm going to start building up our first granny square. So for your slip knot, I'm pointing my finger towards my belly. I'm draping the yarn so that the tail is on the right side and the working yarn is on the left side. I'm holding both of them with my left hand, and I'm twisting my finger around. I'm putting my pinchers into that loop I've created, and I'm grabbing the working yarn. When I pull the working yarn through, and I kind of gently pull on both the tail and the working yarn, I've created what we call a slip knot. And that slip knot can kind of conform itself to the shape of your hook, whatever hook you're using. Now, when I'm setting up the yarn on my finger to create tension, I go over my pinky, under my ring, over my middle, and around over top of my pointer. I like to hold my hook on my left hand. This yarn is kind of staying up so that I have something to grab. And I use my right hand with my thumb on the thumb pad, and I'm kind of twisting this hook around in order to kind of do that. I'm also holding on to this slip knot here because I want to make a little bit of space between the slip knot and my hook because that's where I need to go through in order to create a chain. So here I go with my first stitch. Remember, we're going to do 4 chains. I'm going over, under, and I'm pulling that one through, over, under, pulling the yarn through. That's 1. Over, under, pulling the yarn through, 2. Over, under, 3. Over, under, 4. So I have 4 chains and I have the knot at the bottom. And now I'm going to join these 4 chains together in order to make a circle. So the way I join them together is by going through this first stitch. So I'm going to put my hook through this first stitch. So I split the stitch, half on the top, half on the bottom. And I'm still holding my yarn with my pointer finger kind of up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to yarn over. So I had to go over under to grab a little bit of that yarn. And then both of these loops, I'm going to take this yarn that I yarned over and I'm going to pull it through both of those loops in order to do what we call a slip stitch. So a slip stitch just connected those 2 together. And I'll back up and show that to you again. So we have our chain 4, and we're going to join these 4 together into a circle. And the way we're going to join these 2 together into a circle is by taking the hook and going through the first stitch and then yarning over. And you're going to pull this yarn, so you might need to twist your hook to grab the yarn. And you're going to pull that yarn through both of these 2 loops down here. So feel free to use your thumb a little bit to grab that yarn and pull it away from the hook so that there's space for it to go through. And we've done a slip stitch. Now your slip stitch joined your stitches into a circle. So kind of pull apart your stitches so that you can find your circle and find the center of your circle. So here you can kind of see there's the center of my circle right there where my finger's poking through. So the next stitches that we do are going to be into this circle. So we're going to be stitching 2 double crochets into that circle, and we're going to build from there. All right, so the handout is right above in the chat where you saw. And once this video is on YouTube, the handout will be underneath the video as well. All right, now we're going to do something called a chain stitch, and we're going to do 3 chains. And the reason why we're doing 3 chains is to build up the height of this first round of granny square. So now that I've joined these together and I've made this little circle, I'm going to do 1 chain, 2 chains, 3 chains. And that's how tall a double crochet is going to be. So the question is, do we do that on the 4th chain or the next one for our circle? So this is attached to where we just did our slip stitch. These 4 are just coming out of that last slip stitch. Now we're going to start putting a stitch in it. And this next stitch we're going to put into the circle is going to be our first double crochet stitch. So in order to do a double crochet, the first step is yarn over. So do your over under to grab some yarn. Then I like to hold on with my pointer finger, and I need to direct my hook into the circle, hook first. So I'm going to dive hook first into the circle, and then I'm going to grab that yarn that's sitting right there, and I'm going to pull that yarn through my circle. Now I have 1, 2, 3 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over one more time and pull off the middle 2, yarn over, and pull off the bottom 2. So all of those steps are together written down in the double crochet on the handout. So all those things, the yarn over, pull through the stitch, yarn over, pull through the middle 2, yarn over, pull through the last 2, all of those steps make up 1 double crochet. And we're going to be doing 3 double crochets. So now I'm going to do the same thing again. So if you missed it the first time, I'm about to do it again. So to start a double crochet, you yarn over, which means put your yarn around your hook. hold on to it, use your pointer to hold on to it, go into the circle head first. So I went through the circle, and then I'm going to grab the yarn that's kind of sitting right there and pull that through the circle. Now I have 1, 2, 3 loops, yarn over, pull over the middle 2, yarn over, pull over the bottom 2. And this is the first petal of our granny square. So to show you where we're at, there are going to be 4 different petals, and we've made the first of the 4 petals. And this first of the 4 petals is a little bit different because it has this chain 3 from where we first started and then 2 double crochets. All of the other ones are just going to have 3 double crochets. And in order to make it a square shape, we need to kind of make a corner. So if you can see this picture, see how it has a little bit of a corner before we get to the next petal? The way that we're creating that little bit of a corner is going to be by chaining 2. So we're going to chain 2, and that's how we're going to get our corner to start the next petal. Okay, so I just finished my chain 3 to create the height, 2 double crochets. Now I'm going to chain 2, 1, 2. Now I'm going to go into that same circle from where I started, and I'm going to do 3 double crochets. So in order to do a double crochet, you yarn over, hold on to it with your pointer, and go hook first into the circle. Grab some yarn, pull it through, yarn over, go through the middle 2, yarn over, go through the bottom 2. That's 1 double crochet. Another one, yarn over, go head first into the circle, grab that yarn and pull it through the circle, yarn over, middle 2, yarn over, bottom 2. One last double crochet, yarn over, into the circle, yarn over, pull through the circle, yarn over, middle 2, yarn over, bottom 2. So now I've just done 3 double crochets. So I've done 2 of the petals. I have my first set of petals. I have my second set of petals. I need to chain 2 to kind of give me that square corner before I go on to the next petal. So from here, I need to chain 2, 1, 2, and then I'm going to start 3 double crochets into that same original circle. So yarn over, into the circle, yarn over, through the circle, yarn over, middle 2, yarn over, bottom 2. Another double crochet, yarn over, into the circle, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, middle 2, yarn over, bottom 2. That's 2. One more, yarn over, into the circle, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, middle, yarn over, bottom. That's our third petal of 3 double crochets. So we need a chain 2 to make the next corner. 1, 2, and now you're going to put 3 more petals in. If you're starting to kind of run out of space inside of your circle for where your stitches go, these stitches actually slide around that circle. So you can kind of pull these stitches and kind of make some more space on your circle because they're all kind of just floating in the circle right now, all kind of around that circle. So you can open them up and make more space. All right, last 3 double crochets, yarn over, into the circle, yarn over, through the circle, yarn over, middle, yarn over, bottom, yarn over, into the circle, yarn over, grab it, yarn over, middle, yarn over, bottom. One last, yarn over into the circle, yarn over, grab, yarn over middle, yarn over, bottom two. And we have now completed our square. So we need to make that little corner with our 2 stitches, and then we're going to use a slip stitch to attach it to where we began. So chain 2, 1, 2, and then on our very first stitch, remember how we started with a chain 3 instead of a double crochet? So you might be able to see on my stitches right here, I have 1, 2, 3 of those V shapes right there. I'm going to put my hook through the 3rd V. I'm going to split that stitch and put my hook through that V. I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to take off the bottom 2, and that's how I connect it together to make the inside square. That's it. We did it. So in order to finish off this round, I'm going to pull my slip knot, pull that hoop a little bit longer. I'm going to cut myself and leave a little bit of a tail. I'm not going to cut myself. I'm going to cut my tail. That's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to take the tail and I'm going to put the tail through this loop and pull gently. And now I have completed my first square. And if you kind of pull apart your square, you'll notice that you have 4 corners. Those 4 corners are the places where you chained 2 in between your clusters. And so those 4 corners are the places that we're going to build our next round out of. So if you're following along on this pattern, we're about to change colors and we're about to start another cluster of double crochets at these corners. And the way we're going to build a new corner is by doing the same thing we did before. We're going to do 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets in that corner. Then we're going to jump to the next corner and we're going to do 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets. And we're going to keep going to each one of those 4 corners to build out the next layer. And the next layer looks like this. So see how we had these 4 petals. Now in those 4 corners that you just were spacing out, you're going to put 2 clusters in this corner with a chain 2 right here that's hiding. You're going to put 2 clusters in here with a chain 2, 2 clusters, 2 clusters, and that's how you're going to build that next round. All right, so someone was asking about joining at the very end. So I think I can undo this and show you that again. We're in luck. I can. Okay, so here's the ending. I chained 2, and in order to connect it together, we're doing the thing called a slip stitch. So at the very beginning of your round, you have 1, 2, 3 little stitches. You're going to put your hook through the 3rd stitch. You're going to grab some yarn and you're going to pull that yarn through both of those loops in order to finish off this square, and that's called a slip stitch. Then I'm going to pull my hook a little bit further to make the loop a little bit bigger. I cut myself a little bit of a tail, just a couple inches, and then I'm pulling that tail through that last loop, and that's how I'm securing that round. So I'm going to switch colors now, and this is one of the other things that kind of mystified me the first couple of times I did a granny square. How do you change colors? I don't understand how you do that. It's really not as hard as you might think it's going to be. Let's see. I think I'm going to do green because it'll show up a little bit better. The light green. So this color that I'm switching from the peach tree, I'm switching now to the sage color, which is like a light green. And I left off right here. Here's my tail hanging. When I'm about to start the next part, I don't like to start in the same corner that I just finished in. I like to go to a new fresh corner. So I just kind of turned my piece a little bit to get to this next corner. And go ahead and kind of spread it out so you can see exactly where your corners are. Some people, if you're just starting out too, if you happen to have stitch markers, it sometimes helps beginners to kind of know where your 4 corners are by kind of putting a stitch marker so that you don't lose track of them. So that's another idea. If you got 4 stitch markers, you can do that. So the way that you change colors, or the way that you start the next round, is going to be to go with your hook through that corner. So there's a big corner, there's a big space in your corner, put your hook through it. Then you're going to wrap the yarn over the hook. So I have a little bit of tail and a little bit of working yarn, and I'm going to pull that through my corner. I'm going to do a chain stitch, and that's it. That's all that you need to do to switch colors, believe it or not. It's not as hard as you think it's going to be. There's not a lot of knots. There's not a lot of things going on. So let me show that to you again. So I put my hook through the big corner. I take the yarn and drape it over my hook. And then I pull the hook through that corner. And with all that double amount of yarn, I'm just going to do a chain. So I yarn over and pull through. And then that's it. I'm connected on. I'm ready to go. So to start this next round, just like we've started before, we're going to be using 3 chains. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. And the reason why we do those 3 chains is to build up the height so that our next stitch can be a double crochet and it can be the same height as those 3 stitches. So if you want to do the next row with the same color, you can tie off exactly the same way we did and just start again with the same color the same way that we did. Some people like to keep the yarn, and so after you've done your slip stitch, then go through here and grab your yarn and do the chain 3 to start your next round with the same color if you don't want to switch colors. All right, so I have my chain 3, and then I'm going to do 2 more double crochets. So yarn over through that corner, grab it, pull through, yarn over middle 2, yarn over bottom 2. I'm going to do another double crochet, yarn over through the corner, yarn over, pull through, yarn over middle 2, yarn over bottom 2. And now I have my first cluster of 3. It's the chains and 2 double crochets. So notice how I'm kind of pulling my stitches to this side of the corner because I'm about to chain 2, and then I'm going to put another set of cluster into that same corner in order to give me a square shape. So I'm going to chain 2, 1, 2, and now I'm going to put 3 more double crochets into the same corner to create the next part of the square. Yarn over into the corner, grab it, yarn over middle, yarn over bottom, yarn over into the corner, grab it, yarn over middle, yarn over bottom, yarn over into the corner, grab it, yarn over middle, yarn over bottom. So now I have a new corner, and you can tell it's already on its way to making a square. So you do not need to do any chains to get to the next corner. So from this last cluster of 3 double crochets, you're going to go straight into the next corner, no extra chains. The only time you do chains are when you're at the actual corner. You're not ever going to do chains along the side. So now I'm going to go straight into this next corner with a double crochet. So I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to pull my hook all the way across into this corner, grab the yarn and pull it through, yarn over middle, yarn over bottom, that's 1, yarn over into this next corner, grab it, pull through, yarn over middle, yarn over bottom, yarn over into the corner, grab it, yarn over middle, yarn over bottom. That's my first cluster. And then to make this next corner, I need to chain 2 and do another cluster of 3 double crochets into that same corner to build up that next round. So there's a question in the chat asking about changing color. It seems like a lot of cutting and loose threads. And yes, you are 1000% correct. And anybody who has ever crocheted before, your least favorite part of crocheting is what we call weaving in your ends. Because when you have all these ends, it's very tempting to just take a pair of scissors and snip all these down. But if any of us have ever done that before, you might realize that if you cut too close to a knot or cut too close to any of these tie-off pieces, then if you pull it in just the wrong way, it's going to take out some of your work. So the way that you secure your yarn at the end is by basically hiding it in your piece. And I'll show you a little bit later how you're going to take that yarn and hide it into the rest of your square. You don't want to cut it too close. You want to leave plenty. So just in case it, heaven forbid, becomes unraveled, you have enough yarn to kind of retie it and re-secure it if you need to. So that's why we do end up having all these loose ends and having to weave those all in at the very end. All right, I'm back to this corner. So I need to chain 2 to create that corner. So here's 1, 2, and I'm going to do 3 double crochets into that corner. Here's 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets, and 3 double crochets. Now remember, when I'm about to jump to the next corner, you do not need to do any chains along the side. You need to go straight into the next corner. So straight into the next corner with a double crochet, another, and another. So now we have 3 double crochets in this next corner. And hopefully you know what comes next. We're going to chain 2 to make that corner. 1, 2, and we're going to do another cluster of 3 double crochets. Here's 1, here's 2, and here's 3. All right, we're at the last corner. So I'm going to put this 3 double crochets into the next corner, no extra chains. Here's 1 double crochet, 2. I'm kind of like holding on to the tails so that they stay out of my way with my other hand. It's kind of how I manage them. 2, 3. And remember that these stitches are kind of movable. So if you need to give yourself some more space, you can kind of squish them up together, kind of move them around, give yourself some space. And now I'm going to chain 2 to make the corner. 1, 2, and then I'm going to double crochet. 1, 2, 3. And I have finished that next round of my granny square. And so in order to officially finish this, I need to put a slip stitch through in order to kind of keep it all together as a square. So remember when we started, we have 1, 2, 3 stitches from where we started. I'm going to take the hook and I'm going to go through the 3rd stitch and split that stitch. I'm going to yarn over and pull through both of those. And that is the slip stitch that connects it all together to make that square. So I'm going to pull this a little bit further away from my work. I'm going to cut a little bit of a tail. And I'm going to pull that tail through the loop and gently kind of pull that to finish it off. And then I have this round finished. So our next round is just one tiny little bit different. And then you have officially learned everything you need to know about granny squares, and you'll be able to go crazy and make all sorts of things. So I think I saw a question in the chat. I thought I saw one, but maybe I don't see it right now. I don't think I see it. Can you, okay. Are you saying cut the thread each row if you want to keep crocheting? Yes, so you can keep crocheting with the same color. You don't have to cut and tie knots. And I think we're good. So here's the picture of what the granny square is kind of looking like. We have just done, we did our circle at the beginning, the 4 chain stitches to make the circle with a slip knot. We did our 4 clusters of double crochet with our corners being chain 2s. Then we've just added the 2nd layer of 2 double crochets into each one of the corners. Now, the reason why this next one is different compared to what we've just done is now there are holes in the side of our work. So we have our corners, of course, the 4 corners, but now we also have a little bit of a gap in the side. So we are going to be doing our clusters in the corners the same way, but we're going to do 3 double crochets on this side hole, and then we're going to do our clusters in the corner again. So now that we have holes in the side, we are going to add extra clusters, and that's how we're going to keep that nice square shape. So if you want to make something like the bag I showed you at the beginning, oh my, sorry, throwing my camera around. You this is the same thing over and over and over again. So far we've only done 2 rounds, but if you keep going and keep building and keep building, you just need to make sure that you put clusters along the side into every one of the little holes that are created when you're spacing those out. And that's how you continue to make very, very large granny squares that you can then turn into things like a bag. So also another like cheat code for me is I found this canvas tote bag at Michael's, imagine that. And a granny square is not a good thing to hold as a purse because things are going to fall through all of these holes. So you want to line your bag. And all I did was stitch the granny squares to this canvas tote bag. And then I have a ready to go bag that is not going to lose all my money and all my crochet hooks and other random things I might put into this bag. So yeah, you know what you need to know now. We're going to do another round together. If you have some questions, I'm having a hard time seeing them. So if I'm missing something, so how do you get to the next corner? I see that question. And I'm thinking, okay, so I think that you're asking about if you're not going to change color, how to get to the next corner. So let me try and answer that when we get to our next part. And can you close the square again? Let me see if I can close the square again. Try and open it for myself. And then I do need to tell you about weaving in the ends. That is an important piece that we need to talk about before we end today. So I hope that you are learning lots. I hope that you're not too terribly frustrated. I was telling somebody that I think when you're first learning crochet, there are usually tears involved. Like I'm telling you, it's not an easy craft. So if you have a couple of frustration tears in your eyes, I am sorry, but that is actually a part of this process. So keep going. Don't give up. Try the papers. See if the papers help. See if this video helps. Try watch it again. Keep going. Don't give up on yourself. Okay, so here's where we finished our last double crochet. And then here are the 1, 2, 3 stitches from the beginning. So in order to combine these together, you're going to go through the 3rd stitch with your hook. And then you're going to yarn over and pull through both of those. And doing that is called a slip stitch. So you finish each round by having a slip stitch, and then you're going to take the ends of your yarn through that loop and gently pull it. And there you go. Now, if you did not want to change colors, you still need to do a slip stitch, but when you get to your slip stitch there, then you do need to kind of go through one of these before you get to the corner, and then you can build out from the corner. So you don't want to just pull this yarn all the way over to the corner because you're going to have a lot of extra yarn. If you're keeping the same color, I recommend putting a stitch through, like a slip stitch, and then going into your corner and building from there. So you can try that. So there's a question in the chat asking about joining the individual squares to make an afghan. Well, thank you for asking that question because I do want to show this off. I've been working on this for probably 2 weeks, and I have this really, really soft loops and threads yarn. It's one of our soft, cuddly Chanel kind of yarns. And so I have made 6 gigantic granny squares, and I've connected all these 6 gigantic granny squares together. And these are the stitches that I used to connect those together. And I was able to make an afghan. You can make an afghan out of teeny tiny squares. You can make an afghan out of these really large squares. You can combine them together. I don't have time in class today to show you how to combine all of these together, but I do already have a class that I've taught previously that you can watch on our Michael's YouTube channel. So there's a class that's called Crochet Granny Square Bag, I believe, and it's by Megan Fay. So we'll try and find that for you. But it shows how you make the stitches to connect the squares together so that you can kind of build out. You can make it, like I said at the beginning, a scarf by just connecting all those granny squares together to make a really long line that you can turn into a scarf. You can turn them into a bag. So there is a more advanced class where I show you not just the basics of granny squares, but what to do with the granny squares and how to combine those together. So that is a video that's currently available on the Michael's YouTube channel. So if you go to Michael's and you search granny square bags, I believe that's what it's called. Or you can search my name, Megan Fay, F-A-H-E-Y, then you can see that too. And if any of you are feeling great about the success you're having with making your granny squares, I would love to see what you're doing. So please don't forget about our Instagram channel. We have Learn with Michaels, where we like to post people who are working on new projects. So if you have something that you're proud of and you want to show off, tag us at Learn with Michaels, and I'd love to show and tell and show everybody else what you're working on. So feel free to do that. And you can also follow me at my own personal Instagram, which is the number 4M Coleman. And you can see some of the other crochet things that I've done before. So there are other types of granny squares. There are hexagons and there are squares. So this is kind of the basics that I'm just trying to show you how to build up a square. But there are lots of other fun patterns you can do once you've kind of gotten the hang of this. So this is a whole world, a whole rabbit hole you can definitely go down and have lots of fun with these granny squares. So I'm going to start the next round and see how much of that next round I can do. I'm going to move a little faster, so I hope that's okay with you. I'm going to put my hook. After I've tied something off, I kind of like to twist my work around and kind of leave that off to the side and start on a new corner. But you can start in the same corner every time. It doesn't really matter. That's just my preference. So I put the hook through the corner and I kind of drape the yarn over my hook. I pull it through the corner and then I yarn over with both of those yarns and kind of make my first chain. That's basically like a slip stitch what I just did. And then I'm going to chain 3 still. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to build my cluster of 3. So now I'm going to have a double crochet. 1, 2. And that completes the first cluster of 3. So I need to chain 2, 1, 2, and then another cluster of 3, 1, 2, 3. And now this is how it's different because we have this space in the middle. So for the space in the middle, we're going to put a cluster of 3. There's no extra chains. You go straight into the double crochet. 1, 2, 3. And then no extra chains, go straight into the next corner. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to chain 2 to wrap it around. And I'm going to do a cluster of 3 in the same corner. 1, 2, 3. This is a side, so I need a cluster of 3 to go into the side. 1, 2, 3. Then I'm straight onto the next corner with no extra chains or anything, straight into my double crochet corner. 2, 3. I'm going to chain 2 and 3 more double crochets. Someone was asking, I think, before about tension. So you might see me flicking my hand over here, and that's because I'm using a lot of scrap yarn. I love to wrap my scrap yarn onto big pieces of cardboard, kind of like giant embroidery floss holders. And so I love to use up all my scrap yarn when I'm making my granny squares. So if you feel like you can't move the yarn, that's too much tension. So make sure that you have enough kind of loose yarn so that's not the thing that's making your stitches get too tight or too different. Here's another double crochet and the third double crochet. And I am going to go ahead and finish this side by going through, getting my tails wound up in there. Here's 1, 2, and 3. And into the corner, 1, 2, 3, chain 2, 1, 2, and 3 double crochets, 1, 2, 3, 3 in that center, and a slip stitch to join these together. So I'm going to count on this round 1, 2, 3 stitches, and in the third stitch I'm going to go ahead and put my hook through, grab some yarn and pull off both of those, pull it away from my work a little bit, cut a tail. Yes, the instructions with my hand showing the examples is one of the PDFs. There's a PDF that's a pattern, and there's a PDF that has my hands in it so that you can see that. And this is our square. And now is our last part, nobody's favorite, but very necessary. In order to weave in your ends, sometimes I like to use a smaller size hook, or you can use a yarn needle. And what you want to do when you're weaving in your ends is you basically want to hide the extra yarn. So if I go ahead and use this yarn needle, thread it through, my favorite place to hide yarn is through these little coils that go around the center. So I'm going to take this yarn and I'm going to pull it through some of these coils right here. Then I'm going to go through a couple more of those coils with my yarn and go through a couple more of those. And then once you've gone through several of them and you have enough of the yarn hidden, then you can trim it down. So at this point, since I have plenty of that extra yarn hidden underneath, I can go ahead and trim it. And then you can kind of pull it and it hides. If you're in like one of these corners, and if I have a hook instead of a needle, I sometimes take my hook and I'll go through some of those coils. So I'm kind of worming my way through some of those coils, and I'm grabbing this yarn and I'm pulling it through these coils. And once I've pulled it through those coils, then I can trim down this extra because I've already hidden some of that extra stuff right there. So this video, I'm going to talk to the people who put up the videos. Usually on a Friday, the video doesn't go up on YouTube until Monday, but I'm going to try and get it up for you today. See if we can get that done in the next probably 2 hours. So then you can find that YouTube video. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Michael's YouTube channel and you'll get a little notification when new videos show up. So you'll know that this one is ready for you to go. I'll also post it on my Instagram for M. Coleman so that you can grab this video when it is available and you can watch again. I'm also going to do kind of put together some of these different projects that I've been showing you and kind of do a little show and tell myself of some of the different crochet projects I've been working on. So maybe it can inspire some of your color choices, or maybe it will inspire you to show off your work so that I can see what you're making too. And I'm just kind of pulling all these ends through and I'm weaving them into other stitches that already exist before I cut them down. And the reason again is because sometimes you cut too close to the knot and it ends up fraying itself. So yeah. Yay. Oh, thank you so much. Well, I have had a ton of fun. I hope that you have too. And Kana, if you don't mind switching back one more time to my last camera, I just want to thank everybody for coming to this class. I want to see your granny squares, show them off. Does anybody have any to hold up right now? Oh yeah, there we go. We have some success today. That's exciting. You should be proud of that. So I hope that you were not frustrated to tears, but do keep trying if you were frustrated. There's plenty of different available materials to try and help you get on track with this. If you get stuck at Slipknot, just keep trying. You're going to get it. And then the next part's going to come easier and easier and easier. So thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Good to see you and happy crafting. Bye, everyone.